See, I pretend like I know what I'm doing. Does it look like I know what I'm doing?
It does.
Because I have no effing clue what I'm doing.
That's all right. Fake it till you make it.
I'm here with this beautiful gentleman, Mike Mahar, and I want to start this off and say that this has probably been the one, I know we talked about this a little bit, that I've been most looking forward to doing for several reasons. First off, your career speaks for itself, and you've done some amazing things. And second is that we have some history together.
Yeah, we do.
He fired me, actually. But it was so. That for
You
me.
were the first, actually.
I was the first person
you were
you've
the
ever
first
fired?
person I fired.
Was it easy or hard? Tell me it was at least hard.
It was difficult. It gets easier as you go, I think.
Sure, and now you're
Not that
fantastic
that's a
at
good
it.
thing. Yeah, I'm great at firing people.
So, I mean, it was.
I don't know if that's something I'm proud of, but
Mike runs sound for this beautiful band called
Halestorm.
Hailstorm.
Yeah.
And I was the monitor engineer and drum tech for it.
Yeah, you were.
Back in the.
When I first started,
That's when
2012
yeah, I remember
or
it went
something
from
like
a.
that.
The first time you guys went from a RV
these
to a
guys.
bus.
Yeah, I had just joined, so it was the first like bus tour, I think.
Yeah.
And I worked for other bands previous to that for a long time, but it was like my first run with those guys.
Yeah.
I showed up and you were there.
Yes, I
And
was.
how long did you last before I had to can you?
It was only a couple weeks. I
Yeah,
believe.
right.
Yeah.
It was a quickie.
Yeah,
It was in New Orleans, I remember.
I think you're right.
Because
And
I
it
had
was-
a buddy that lived down there.
You know, there's times in life where there's moments that define you. And for me, for the longest time, that moment defined who I was. And it was such a dark moment for me that took me so many years. And that was the moment that got me to look at my life and choose sobriety for it.
Yeah.
And I separated from, not that you caused me to separate from music, but you were the turning point for me to look inward and say, what is really going on with my life? So I just want to say thank you for firing me. But really, though,
You're welcome, I guess. I can see.
It was such a moment. And then when I came, I remember my buddy Brian Hardiswick was running sound for in this moment. He invited me out, and you guys were there. And I was so nervous because it's my first time I was going to see you in so many years. And the love and support, and RJ giving me a hug and seeing you guys was just like, it's funny because I feel like sometimes we get in our heads too much. And we think that people think about us all the time, when in reality they really don't.
Yeah, I think we all suffer from that.
Yeah,
for sure.
and I'm thankful to be here and to show that, like, you know what, you can come around. Moments don't need to define you.
Right. Yeah.
Have you ever dealt with any of that stuff in your life? Am I the only one?
I can't say that I've been fired for that. Well, actually, I was. Come to think of it, so yeah, the one gig that I've been fired for was a sober tour. I won't mention the artist, but
that's fine.
And it was a surprise to me because some of them were and some of them weren't.
Yeah.
And of course, the ones that weren't were like, "Come on and party,"
Yeah.
and then so we're like, all right, sure, and so. It didn't have that didn't have the end results with me that it did with you.
Sure.
But I did end up coming to the same result through other experiences in my life and whatever. And I've been sober for 1.5 years now. And
that's awesome, man. Congratulations.
Thank you. And I mean, I couldn't be happier. And
yeah,
I've never felt better. And all the things that used to make me crazy, like you were talking about, thinking, oh, well, somebody 3 days ago said such and such, or I said that to somebody, I wonder if they're not thinking about it.
Yeah.
Well, it used to drive myself crazy thinking about that shit. So it's been a great relief, and certainly the best decision I've made in my life. And it's not a struggle at all. It's kind of the easiest thing to do, really, once you come to realize the
a lot of things have changed too now from then to here. Now I think a lot of people are more open to talking about it, to discussing it. I think, well, you started into sound way before I was, and I'm sure you've seen a bunch of changes in the industry as well. From and I kind of want to ask. I want to start the conversation that I should have started 10, 12 years ago. And I would love to learn, how did you get into sound? That's an interesting question, a complex question, I guess. I was always interested in audio and technology, even from as a young kid. I mean, I'm talking like elementary school, preschool, whatever. My father had a reel-to-reel machine, and I remember standing there in front of it and listening to tapes and watching the meters go, and just with the headphones on. And I remember, I don't have a lot of memories of my early childhood, but I do remember like trying to conceptualize like how that process happened. And there were like live recordings that he had on reel to reel, and I, in my whatever 6, 8-year-old mind, however old I was, remember thinking to myself, man, it must have been a pain to carry this machine to the show. You know, in my child mind, I figured that he had taken physically the machine that was in our living room to the show and recorded. And I was like, he must have had a really long extension cable and all this thing. These were things I was thinking as a preschooler. And so I guess that curiosity stayed with me throughout my life. And then as I became a teenager and stuff, and I just kind of followed it, and ended up going to school, and that's why this like
thing
a tribute to your dad?
Well, it is kind of. It's the reel-to-reel influences I've realized, and I'm sort of keeping that alive by my recent starting of the collection of odd tape machines.
Yeah.
This one I picked up on a whim. It's a Nagra 4 SJ. It was made in like 1972. I'm older by 1 year. Don't you look at me that way. And anyways, so I like the reel-to-reel. I like the analog, and it definitely harkens back to something that inspired me to do what I do. And it gives me a little, like a project and something that isn't like a repetitive day-to-day kind of thing. Since I tour manage as well, I'm like at the computer, in the office, and this is awesome. It's the fun part of my day, but it's nice to be able to capture the shows on tape. The thing sounds amazing. And I picked that up in Toronto a few weeks ago. I bought it from some dude in a park in the middle of Toronto. It was like, tape machine drug deal. I literally walked like from the gig 2 miles to the city park with a stack of cash, met this guy. We sat in the park. He had the tape machine. I had the cash. We made the exchange. Sight unseen. I didn't plug the thing in.
Tape machine drug deal.
I walked back to the gig with it and like set it down and plugged it in. I didn't even stop at the bus, and hit it. It sounds great. So
that is awesome.
So it's great. And this thing is special. It was made for scientific research more so than recording music. So the frequency response on this thing is 2.5 hertz to 35,000. So so it was used for measurement. Primarily it was designed for measurement more than recording.
Yeah.
The record feature is like to document the measurements, as it says in the manual for this thing. So it's super sensitive, and it works great 52 years later.
Wow.
It sounds awesome. So
yeah. Dad's tape machine, sparkle in your eye. What got you? What do you remember your first time mixing?
I mean, I mixed for radio in college, and stuff, and I did studio work and stuff like that. But like mixing live, I think was at the Rathskeller in Boston in Kenmore Square, and it was a shit show.
Why is that?
It just was. I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, I'd never mixed a live show before. And so I cut my teeth. Like, I mean, I could work in the studio, and I mixed for air, and I knew what I wanted, but having it at an amplified level, you know, and all the stuff that goes along with that, is a whole different ball game. And so I really cut my teeth on that in the clubs of Boston in the early '90s, and then New England, and I just climbed in a van with my friends from Berkeley. And
tell me about your first tour.
I worked with a jam band that was, before that term was coined, when that scene was just sort of burgeoning, and in New England, there's a band called Schleho. It was a jazz fusion instrumental math rock kind of band. They were awesome. You know, they were my buds, and it was the four of them and myself. And the joke was, 20% of nothing is nothing, because we were so broke. And we just drove around in our van, and we did eventually tour. I mean, we toured nationally, and but we slept on floors and lived on coffee and shared a house, and were broke as a joke and starving to death, and did all that stuff.
Some of the best memories, though.
Long time, and we had great memories. Shows were great, and it led to, you know, other things in my life that eventually have led to this. So it was great, and those guys are still my buddies. Yeah, we were fully committed. I mean, we, had no doubt in our minds that we were going to conquer the world. Like, it's happening. It was certain.
Yes.
It was definitely going to happen. And
you came close,
we went at it for a good 8 years. I did, at least, and then I had other things going on that were going to pay my bills, so I left. And those guys still play, but occasionally, and we're still buddies. But so Schleho was my first gig, and then through them I became associated with the Allman Brothers, which it's ironic that we're here and outside of Atlanta today, and everything.
What was it like with Allman Brothers?
Well, I didn't work on the road with the brothers, but I became friends with their production manager and front of house engineer, Bud Snyder, who became my mentor, still is. And still
What's the best piece of advice you've learned from him?
I don't know if there's a specific piece of advice that I learned from Budsky. It was more of a philosophy, and just learning from how, like, watching him work and watching him do the things he did, and how he handled himself in different situations, whether it was good or bad. And we went through a lot of stuff together, and he just, more than anything, showed me that you can you can do your thing. There isn't necessarily a set of rules that must be followed, or like a secret code that only some people get to know that is the key to being successful or whatever. Because before you get to, like, say, okay, this level or whatever level you want to get to, you do wonder, like, how, okay, what you don't know. So to see someone who I could associate with personally, that was a friend and somebody I respected, just be a regular human being, and listening to him advance shows and stuff, it was like, oh, well, I can do that, and his vulnerabilities and stuff as well. I just learned a tremendous amount from him. Just be yourself, and do your thing. Everything will work.
What was your first big boy tour?
working for Dickie Betts with Bud. Yeah. So I worked for Dickie Betts after he left the Allman Brothers Band.
Yeah.
It was 2001.
Yeah.
And actually, we were on tour when 9/11 happened. So, yeah, we were in San Diego on an off day on 9/11 with Dickie. That was my first tour in a bus, like my first real tour.
Yeah.
So the show was supposed to be on the 11th. I woke up to the day sheet coming under the door saying show canceled. In Bud's handwriting.
Wow.
And I yelled to my roommate who was throwing up. Right, getting ready for loaded. The show's canceled. We're like, oh, thank God. Talking about drinking,
Yeah.
Oh, I don't miss that. And so, it was obviously messed up, and we all had that experience together. And the following day, though, Dickie insisted that we play, so we rescheduled the show, and we played on the 12th. And I thought it was a messed up decision until the moment he walked on stage, and it was just like, holy cow, it was the best medicine ever. He walked out there, the place was packed, people came, and I think the history of loss that band went through with Dwayne and Barry and people dying, throughout the course of the history of that band, had taught Dickie some lessons about healing and medicine and things like that, and doing that show was just huge help to everyone and what we were going through.
Wow.
So yeah, that was my first real run, and then I stayed with Dickie for a good 6 or 7 years.
Okay.
At the time, I was mixing monitors. Eventually, Bud Snyder retired from the road, and Dickie moved me to front of house. Which was a relief because, friends don't let friends run monitors. So I was glad to get out of there.
I need a t-shirt of that.
Yeah, and I had been a front of house guy up to that point. I just had been offered the monitor gig because, Bud ran front of house and he had for a long time. So I was like, yeah, I'll take it, and I went and I did it. It was a challenge because it was loud and all that. It was wedges and, no computer screens or any shit. And it was adventurous times. And I had been an Allman Brothers fan my entire life. So that in of itself was not only a strange coincidence that somehow I ended up working with, somebody who I had listened to my entire life, and a prolific musician who defined and, invented a genre of music, him and Dwayne. That was huge to me, and it gave me a lot of confidence. I eventually left under my own accord. I went to Dickie's house and knocked on his door and quit. That was intimidating.
I bet.
Yeah.
To his house.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yes, because we were all in the family and stuff.
Couldn't text it back then, huh?
No, and I wouldn't want to anyways, he had been fired by fax, so if I wanted to retain his respect and maintain our friendship, because we were friends up until he just passed a few months ago. Very dear friends, and that was important to me. So I did go. I actually had to go there 3 times before he was there. He was either gulping or something. He was Donna kept answering the door, and finally, on the 3rd time, she was like, "You're gonna quit, aren't you?" And I was like, "Please don't tell Dick." She knew, and he was really cool about it. He was cool. We had a conversation, and that was it. And I went to work for Huey Thomason and the Outlaws. Wow. So I did a lot of Southern rock, and that was wonderful. And it was the best gig of my life.
Wow,
really great
group
of people. Huey died, and so I left. I didn't carry on with them. They carried on, but I didn't stay. I was not interested in and I ended up in this scene. That's when I transitioned from the Southern rock stuff to modern rock, young rock bands.
Yeah.
So I needed to work. It was 2008. The economy crashed. My boss died. I lost my job, my friend. And, you know, I needed to make money. So I started working for younger rock bands and didn't look back.
Wow. So how'd you get hooked up with Halestorm?
We shared a management company with another band that I was working for at the time called 10 Years.
Okay.
Great band, great guys. Love those guys.
Okay.
Some of the best times of my life.
Okay.
And really, really just awesome. Awesome bunch of dudes.
Is your approach to mixing the same as it was with before?
Yeah.
Same. Consoles have changed. A lot of things have changed. Is your approach still the same?
Yeah. I mix like an old guy. You know, even though I don't like the screens interfering with the listening, I think that the visual aspect of all this pollutes your perception and your judgment with regard to audio. It detracts from... Before, you had your ears to base all of your decisions upon. That was it. Today, you look at this and you're like, God, that doesn't look right, and you change it. Regardless of what it sounds like. And it doesn't matter how aware of it you are. You still look at it and you go, oh, God. Where back in the day, you'd just be like, whack. Well, all right, well, that sounds good. I mean, if you knew what it looked like, you'd probably be like, oh, you know, but... So I think it was I try to maintain some of that, like, purity in my way that I do things. I try not to overdo stuff. I use some plugins more than I used to now. I used to swear that stuff off, but I've become dependent on some of it.
Yeah.
Actually, speaking of Bud Snyder, this is his Shark and Blowfish. So now 20 years later, we have the toys still on the tour. Passed down. When I got Bud's gig, I got his toys.
Oh, I love that. I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, and they've been around the world a million times.
Awesome.
And back, so.
Yeah. What did you do before Halestorm?
Before Halestorm, I did 10 years.
10 years, that's right.
Yeah.
10 years, and then Halestorm.
Yeah.
Kind of at the same time.
I did do double duty for like a good 6 months, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And like when the tours overlapped, I had a buddy of mine cover the 10 Years gig, and I would go do the Halestorm shows, and I'd be advancing both tours, and then I would fly from one to the other and then back. And I was just picking up whatever I could at that point in time to, you know, make as much cash as I could. So, and I did some other stuff in between. I did like some Puddle of Mud gigs there in 2011. Went to Kuwait with Puddle of Mud and did 4 USO shows.
Okay.
Over Christmas of 2011. We actually played on Christmas Day at Arif Jan Air Base in Kuwait, and that was quite the experience.
So there's got to be something with Halestorm that has made you want to stick with for this many years.
Yeah.
What's that thing that makes you like, you know what, this is it?
It's a combination of things, I think. I mean,
the band is amazing. They're amazing
obvious
people.
thing, I mean, they're a good band. Yeah, they're an excellent band.
And just not musicianship, they're amazing people.
And they're wonderful people.
Own.
Yes, we get along very well.
Yeah.
And to me, at this point in my life, that's as much of a incentive as anything else.
Yeah.
To be around people that I enjoy being around, that I enjoy spending my time with, and that I believe in, so that my work, I'm working for something that I believe in, and that I feel like I'm a part of, on a greater level, as cheesy as it sounds, but it's that, and I think to some extent I feel like I'm at a point in my life where I don't necessarily feel like I have to prove anything to anyone other than myself, really, and as long as I'm content in what I'm doing, and I feel like I'm still growing, and I still have the ability to learn things, which, I mean, I believe that when you stop learning things, or you feel like you know it all or whatever, then it's probably time to do something else. I don't claim to be the master of all things, and that's okay. I'm okay with it. And after having worked for like several of my idols, Dickie and Huey and people like that, and Bud Snyder, and having met and worked with Tom Dowd. I mean, one of the most prolific people in the business. Tom invented like a lot of the technology that we still use today. Was an incredibly smart guy, and I mean, he worked on the Manhattan Project before he got into music, and that spurred him to change his path and get into music. He was a bass player, like a classically trained bass player, but he decided he'd start producing or whatever, and his resume speaks for itself. I mean, Ray Charles, Charles Mingus, John Coltrane, Aretha Franklin, Eric Clapton, Skinner, the Allman Brothers, and the list goes on. And like, so Tommy produced the last record I ever did with Schleho, the jam band that I worked for. Yeah. And we were recording it in our drummer's parents' basement. And this was when digital was like just becoming a thing. And so it was the record company that had signed us, had set us up with a little home studio situation with a Mackie Digital 8 bus.
I feel like everybody had one of those.
Yeah. I mean, it was, okay. And Tascam DA78s, which were a 24-bit version. And those machines were it for a while. Yeah. I mean, they blew the ADATs away. The transport was like reliable. Yeah. You could actually work, punch-ins and stuff. It was fast. The ADATs sucked. The sync on them was terrible. It just was frustrating to have to really work. I mean, that's coming from somebody who used to, cut records on 2-inch tape. Yeah. I mean, those machines were way more efficient.
Well, you're still cutting on tape.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I just was talking to our merch guy out here when we were making the move in locations, because the show started, about the board tapes and stuff, and I realized that just the other day after Pittsburgh a few days ago was the first time that I've ever heard one of my board mixes on analog tape. And I've documented like 90% of the shows I've done over the last 30 years. My archive is huge. And it's a tape machine to me is like a time machine. I mean, I haven't kept a written diary of things, which is something I, to some extent, regret, because, of course, I used to always think, oh, well, how could I ever forget that, or whatever. I mean, you forget it. Yeah. It doesn't matter if you're partying or not or whatever. I mean, life goes on. So many experiences happen. You can't remember every single thing that happens to you. It's just the nature of consciousness. So, it was interesting just to have that realization after talking to you out front a minute ago that, like, I actually, Lizzie and Joe and myself listened back to the tape from Pittsburgh the other day on the Nagra. I've got this rig in the front lounge that I'm able to hook it up and play it, and we're listening to the board tapes. So actually, the Nagra has facilitated something that we've aspired to do for a decade now, which is to listen back to the tapes at night after the show on the bus. And, that's something I did with Dickie. I mean, every day, every night, we would get on the bus and we would listen to the show and critique both the audio aspect and the musical aspect, and it just helps to make things better, because regardless of how you interpret what happened or how you performed, whether you're a musician or an engineer, when you listen back to it, it's definitely different. You're so in the moment when the show happens, which is wonderful. It's one of the most zen experiences that I've ever had in my life, and that when that moment happens, that's the only thing that matters, the show, you know, and you do whatever you do during that time to make it as good as you can possibly make it.
Yeah.
And I feel like as a sound engineer, ultimately you're the transducer of energy from the band to the audience.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the technology is ever changing and it's in between you and that and them and everything. But as the person who interprets what's coming through, manipulates it, and then sends it back out, ultimately you have waves in the air that are going through a process, getting manipulated, and then going through a process and turning back into waves in the air. And the audio engineer being the person that's in between those things, the band and the audience, is basically the conduit of energy from the performer to the audience. And I think that that's something that maybe doesn't get talked about or thought of, except for perhaps in very late night conversations or whatever, in hotel rooms between people or whatever. But philosophically, that's how I view the job. And so going back to your question earlier about, like, you know, what do I mix differently than I used to, or do I do things the same? I think that you have to adjust for technology and for the environment you're in. It's just different acoustical environment every day and all of that, and we all have to do that. But I think that the general principles upon which I base what I do have remained intact, and a lot of that did come from my experiences with Bud, and especially with Tom. I was just scared to death that Tom Dowd was coming to our basement, you know. I mean, I was petrified. And he was so cool. And, you know, I had a grand piano like 4 feet from a drum kit in a basement with a drop ceiling. And, you know, and Tom Dowd is coming to our basement. I was like, this is insane. You know, this guy's going to eat me alive. And he was so personable and cool and encouraging and just a regular guy. It had a huge impact on me. And it made me realize that, like, you know, it's a subjective situation.
Yeah.
You know, for everyone.
Yeah.
And so your methodology is, you know, up to you, really.
Do you remember the last song you mixed that made you emotional in a good way?
Yeah, it happens on a fairly regular basis with the live show. I mean, this band changes the set list every day. To those of us who are involved with it every day and know it very intimately, when something out of the ordinary happens that's either good or bad or whatever, I do get emotional when something special happens. And if I'm able to encourage or participate or be a part of making that happen, then that's certainly gratifying. But yeah, music is one of the few things that brings me that, if one of the few, if not the only thing that brings me that type of gratification.
In touring, there's so much stuff going on all the time. And some people thrive in the chaos and in the noise and into everything. How do you quiet the noise?
I mean, it's I don't know. I'm one of those people that happens to thrive in it. I don't do so well in civilian life. I've discovered after 30 years of doing this. I don't know. I feel like I'm in my place here. I know how things work. And it's not just because I'm the one orchestrating things. Even before I was the one making decisions about where, what, when, and how, I function much better out here than I did in normal life. So I mean, I don't know. I thrive around artistic people, and I enjoy being a part of the process. To me, that's worth the sacrifice of, you know, the comforts of home and all the things that come along with that. I mean, I certainly enjoy going home, and I live in Vermont. I have a peaceful place in the woods on a dirt road, and I've been very fortunate in that respect to be able to go back to a quiet place in nature when I'm not on tour.
Yeah.
So I can come out here and make all the noise I want and be surrounded by the ever-changing unpredictability that is touring. And then I can go home to my little shack in the woods and settle down for a bit. And it's good to have, you have to have some sort of balance. I've lived in a lot of cities over my life and lifetime, and I enjoy urban life, but for now, at this point, I've had that, and I get my urban fix on the road. I mean, we go to everywhere in the world, so even though I'm not on vacation, I mean, it's like, okay, I function in big cities, different one every day, globally. So when I'm not working, I would prefer just to go, to back to nature, and
From someone who's been doing it for so long, what is your advice to the new engineers in terms of longevity and be able to keep it in career and be able to keep that path?
Well, take care of your hearing as best as you can. I'm lucky to have been conscientious about that even before I was working as an engineer. All the shows I went to when I was in college and stuff, I always protected my ears. And, I mean, you want to take the earplugs out. You want to stand there and get the full experience, but it is not worth it.
Yeah.
And of course, we all take our shots over the years, especially back in the day when it was all wedges. I mean, you were getting hits, and that Q wedge, as a monitor engineer, that thing is a danger to your health and to your livelihood. So I would say take care of your hearing and just follow your intuition. I mean, of course there are, I don't want to say rules, but you can do things in a variety of different ways as long as you arrive at an end goal that is satisfactory to yourself and to your client, and it represents the music that you're working with in a way that is what people perceive as, and by people I mean you and the musicians, perceive as how they want it to be represented. I think you're good. I would say not to be, to get, pigeonholed is not the right terminology, but caught into a train of thought where you're trying to emulate what other people do. Of course, it's good to learn what other people do and to learn techniques, and that sort of stuff is essential to build your own way of doing things. And I'm not saying that my way is the right way. It's the right way for me.
Yeah.
So for young people that are coming up in it, I would say to, not fixate on the screen, even though you have to use it in order to execute what you need to do with the audio, because everything is represented on a screen now. But I would advise to try and steer away from letting that pollute your perception audibly of what you're doing. I think it's good to close your eyes or turn the thing off, although it's difficult to do that without a physical surface these days, and a lot of people are mixing in the box, myself included, at home, and I've had good results with that. But I mean, I used to sit in the studio and turn all the lights off and put my sunglasses on when I had to mix a session, and I would sit in the dark with my sunglasses on, and after about half an hour or 40 minutes, I mean, your senses become elevated. You have to listen and get some ear training. I mean, you definitely need to have some schooling, whether that be actual school or studying on your own, doesn't matter. I don't think necessarily have to go to school, but you certainly need to just be devoted to learning, I think, and have an open mind.
What do you feel like separates a good engineer from a great engineer?
That's a tricky question, I guess. I don't really know. I think it's subjective.
Sure.
Really.
Well, let me ask you this way. What do you feel like is common mistakes that new engineers make?
Well, being too loud, which I mix loud sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can't control it.
Yeah.
As hard as you try. You know, and overdoing things or underdoing things, prescribing to theories that you don't necessarily have a grip on or whatever. You know, I mean, if you're not sure about what you're doing, then, you know, don't do it. You know, I mean, just think about the fact that, like, some of these iconic records from back in the day were recorded in mono or 4-track record. Axis Bold as Love is a 4-track recording. You know, I mean, Sgt. Pepper's is a 4-track recording. You know, nowadays you got, you know, whatever you want at your disposal, so it's easy to fall into the trappings of endless possibilities.
Yeah.
But I think if you remind yourself that, you know, okay, you listen to some of that, like, okay, Live at the Fillmore, the Allman Brothers, Live at the Fillmore, it's like one of the greatest live recordings of all time. Tommy recorded that to 16-track tape, 2-inch tape, and they called him that day and said, "Tom, we're at the Fillmore, we're on record." And he mustered up a machine and went over there. At least that's how I hear the story told. And that recording is, you know, a cornerstone of, you know, that stuff, and it sounds amazing. So I think I think that in some ways less is more. Yeah. You know, and I'm certainly guilty of over EQing things and, you know, and all of that. Constantly trying to undo things. Like, if I can undo stuff, I will. You know, try to stay out of the way.
What is something you wish you would have learned sooner?
That's a good one too. I guess that you know, just to kind of go with your intuition. I think. I mean, learning how to manipulate things and how to use tools is something that I won't say that I regret not learning sooner. I would say that learning to cut myself some slack probably would be the thing I regret not learning sooner, to be honest, with regard to my profession and the rest of my life.
What is a genre of music that you haven't done yet, but you would love to try?
That's interesting. I've never done any classical music. Okay. I have 2 uncles that sing opera and that are very successful opera singers. I've never done any of that. I've done rock, jazz, improvisational, you know, traditional jazz as well as fusion and electric stuff. Very hard rock, classic rock, southern rock. Not too much urban stuff. I've never been a sound company guy. I haven't worked for production companies. I've always worked for bands. It's not out of design or anything. It's just that's the way things worked for me. I have done very few production company gigs. So I think that exposes you to a wider variety of genres because you are on whatever gig you're on. One day you're on a corporate gig, the next gig you're doing this or whatever. And I think that's a valuable experience to have. I don't have that. I have the experience of working with the artist. And that's just out of fate or whatever you want to call it. You know, that's my thing. And going back to your earlier question, I always felt somewhat insufficient in my knowledge due to my lack of working for production companies. I mean, I'm not going to go out there and hang the speaker, right? But I can walk across the front of the stage and tell you if one of the front fills is out of phase. And, you know, oftentimes, or if like a speaker cabinet has a speaker that's on its way out, you know. So I trust my ears. And that's a piece of advice that I would give to up and coming engineers. Trust your ears. They don't lie. They're very sensitive instruments, and if you become able to, you have to become able to interpret and believe you're hearing. It's an instrument, and it's extremely sensitive. And like, I mean, I can walk across the front of this thing, and I mean, we have one of the best system engineers in the world out here. And I mean, there's been a couple times where I've gone back and been like, hey, that front fill sounds a little weird. And he's been like, it's funny you say that, because it is intermittent. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. And I'm like, okay. And that's encouraging to me, because I'm like, okay,
I still got it.
mixing audio for 30 years, I'm not the completely deaf old guy. You know, so yeah, I wish I had learned just to trust myself earlier, I guess is the answer to the question, yeah.
So Halestorm, and Lizzie specifically, is such an amazing powerhouse singer.
Yes,
which could be maybe tough to mix.
Yeah, that's
without it going way off, and without it being.
Yeah.
What's your trick to that?
Oh, that's top secret. I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you. No, I mean, I use old tricks of the trade that are well known. I mean, I use multiple compressors.
Parallel compression on it? I'm assuming not with
yes, I do. Okay. I use parallel on the vocal group, and I have her separated out from the band. And I'm using the Shelford on her vocal channel. Yeah. So that compressor is fantastic, and being able to blend the compressed signal versus the uncompressed signal is like the most useful feature I've had on a vocal, to be honest with you. So it's funny you asked that question, because I haven't had that up to this point, and I was doing some pretty silly things with like the C6 and then the onboard compressor and then other things, and then, you know, adaptive EQ and all that other crap, just to try and like make my thing work properly. Her range of motion is anywhere within an arm's reach. And she is very conscientious about the microphone, and she's extremely powerful, and that's great. I mean, she's wonderful to work with, but it's so powerful that it is a lot to handle. And to
I'd rather take that than not enough. I'd rather take more of it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. You know, and I would too. And so, but getting it to sit in a place that's happy, that's out front, or it's intelligible but not completely smashed, and there's still dynamics. You know, any vocalist is that's the key, I think. I mean, vocal is the money channel. And
that'd be tough for new engineers. How do you fit that into the entirety of the band, though?
Right, and building a three-dimensional space.
Correct, which is going to lead me to my next question. Do you do much spatial stuff?
I don't do a lot of panning, per se. Okay. I think in a live situation that doesn't lend itself well to the audience.
Well, how do you achieve widening a mix without panning?
Well, with delay and timing, very finite delays. You don't, as a human being, you don't locate sounds because of volume. You locate them due to the differentiation. That's a word I just made up, but between you know, when a sound arriving at one ear and the other, the difference between that is how any animal locates sound. So it's due to time, not volume. And when you twist that pan knob, you're just making it's a volume thing. So it's not really effective. I mean, it is sort of, it does the job, but you don't get the depth of field that you get with using small amounts of delay to move things around. And then, of course, reverb and how you build that, and creating a space certainly is a big part of that. Yeah. But I crack things off center to get them out of the way of the vocal, but just a little bit. Yeah. The only things I have hard panned are the overheads, and even those I maybe have at 6 and 9, or at 3 and 9. You know, occasionally I'll slap them out if the situation deems it. But you know, I pretty much run it bang up the middle, and I get the vocal in there, and I use the things that I learned as a youngster listening to Judas Priest and Iron Maiden and AC/DC and stuff when I was a kid, and the type of vocal effects that formed the way that I hear her in the mix.
Yeah.
You know, especially Priest. Those old Priest records sound great, and Rob's fantastic. He still sounds great. And
well, I know we've taken up more than enough of your time.
Yeah, that's cool.
I could talk to you for hours.
It's great to see you, man.
It's so great to see you. I know you got a bunch of other things. You're doing multiple hats, but thank you for everything. Thank you for being willing to tell the story. Like I said, this is something I've been so excited about wanting to do just because it's such a pivotal moment for me, and you had such a place in my life that was like, most people I think would run away from it. But to be able to see you again, to see this is just, thank you for everything.
It's great. Thank you very much. It's wonderful to see you again. If there's anybody watching this that has been through the situation, just know that, you know, it does come around. Don't let that moment define you. There is life after all that, for sure.
If people want to follow you in your career, where can they follow you at?
I'm unfollowable.
Unfollowable. Well, you got to go to a Halestorm show near you.
That's right.
Man, thank you so much.
Thank you,
I
Nick.
appreciate
It's great to see you.
We did it.